Hi, everyone. David Bailey once said, it's the easiest thing in the world to be a photographer. All you have to be is a bit rude, grow your hair long, and wear a leather jacket, and you're a photographer because there's no union. I was hoping if I wore a leather jacket today, I'd inherit some of his confidence. So my name is Karen Hibbert, and I'm a creative director. If you're not familiar with what that means, it means I'm a typographer, designer, coordinator, booker, photographer, set builder, therapist, liaison, confidant, leader, coffee maker, negotiator, chewing gum holder, cigarette provider, alcohol fetcher, chauffeur, salesman, cleaner, and jester. It's a lot of things, but mainly it's a storyteller. So in the last decade of working at Condé Nast, I've been all of these things in my capacity as a creative. And I did consider having slides for each of these words, but I kind of want to continue with my career. And discretion's one of the most important aspects of being on set. So once everything is tweeted, grammed, posted, printed, and once we've seen the results that we actually purposefully did, that we intended, every moment of every decision we made on set happen, then I'll tell you a little bit about what it means to arrive at those results. And obviously everything we do is intended, because another part of being a creative director is being a bullshitter. It seems fitting that I come talk to you today, as today was my final day at Condé Nast. After 12 years with the company and the vastly changing landscape of print, I wanted to share a few experiences I've had along the way, and tell you how I managed to break into one of the most prestigious publishing companies. So in 2002, I completed a fine art degree in England, and I went on to study a master's in art and design history. I wanted to be a curator originally, but I decided that I was kind of studying all day and I was reading magazines for fun. So I kind of thought my idea of success would be to do something that I do in my spare time rather than something that felt like a chore. So I embarked on gaining an internship at British Vogue, which involved me just trying to really piss them off by keep bringing a resume to the front desk every day, just so it would annoy the managing editor enough to come and have to collect it personally. It finally worked after my 5th attempt. And I secured a 3-week internship in England. They're only in 3 weeks. And I was determined that they would hire me, so I moved to the city with about $500 and not much else. And I gained my first bit of work right after. I think during an internship, it's really important to try and stand out. Say yes to every invitation that you're ever sent to. I think I've gained most of my jobs in the pub afterwards rather than in the office. So I was working originally as a picture editor. I wasn't trained in graphic design. I kind of figure graphic design is like a tool, like a paintbrush or a pencil that you use to create images. So starting off as a picture editor, I was doing a lot of research, and I was asked one day if I'd lay out a page. So of course I said yes, because you never say no. And I just picked up a book from the library, because it was probably pre-internet back then, and sat with it on my knee and designed from a crib sheet. And I think that was really important, because as I said, we're all bullshitters at heart. So soon after a few years, I managed to get offered the job as art director at Vanity Fair in England. And soon after, I became the creative director of editorial and advertorials. And as creative director of a magazine in Europe, sometimes it happens here, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes in different companies it's the same, but you're an art director working on shoots, and you're also a design director. You do both. So you take ideas for an art director, you take ideas, concepts, book the photographer, stylist, model, set builder, work on the location, work with the picture editor, the booking manager, and other members of your team to establish what the shoot's going to be. You concept it researching. All artists are thieves essentially, so you come together with a number of references. And in my experience, I've always tried to book a photographer who works within that capacity. It's no point booking Merton Marcus if you want something raw like a Corin Day. You just won't, the two won't marry. So I'd like to think of the art department in a magazine as like, they kind of take all the ingredients, they take people's ideas, they take stories, they take ideas for photo shoots, and they put everything together. They mix it all in the pot, and it kind of comes up looking like a magazine. You also decide on its pace, its content with publishers and editors. And that obviously is absolutely influenced by advertisers and also the audience and who you're appealing to. When the content isn't that great, you pull out a big pair of typographic jazz hands and you put them around it. And when the pictures are fantastic, you let them speak for themselves. Being the head of a creative department is to accept a lot of responsibility. I've been asked recently to describe the principles of leadership. I think for me, it's about decision making. It's about looking cool and calm on the outside and hiding all your panic on the inside at all times. It's about making decisions when things go wrong, and it's about accepting a new direction if a shoot appears to be going with a different feel. It's mainly about flexibility and thinking on your feet. Once you've commissioned all the contributors, created mood boards and direction, the idea is that the shoot should run smoothly. You should have everything in line. So on the day of the shoot, the idea is that you sit back and it all goes according to plan. And I'd say that. So I'm just going to show you a few slides from my time as creative director of Vanity Fair, as art director at Teen Vogue, and my current position as design director for a group called Content Development within Condé Nast. So please, as I'm going through, do ask questions. You can yell or throw things at me. You can do whatever you like to gain my attention. I can promise you it's happened to me before. So firstly, two of my favorite covers, Liv Tyler by Paola Kodaki and Riley Keough by Mark Seliger. This is a good example of where things go a little bit awry. We weren't supposed to shoot Liv with wet hair, and Riley turned up with blue hair. So it's about changing and adapting, like I say, as you go along. We actually had a guard have a seizure on set, and we had to block off the set and have 30 of New York's finest fire department come in to help him with that, and we continued with the shoot. This is Gwyneth Paltrow, shot by Mark Seliger again, and on the left, a couple of covers that I did. The far left, it was a commission piece by Matt Collishaw, and Gwyneth this cover kind of gained a lot of press coverage because she's topless, because it's Europe. You can. This was an idea of how to put typographically, how to make a portfolio of celebrities' work. So it was sometimes, we get different shoots, and it's trying to make them coherent. And this was kind of a way of making the editorial fit with the images. This was Rebecca Hall, photographed by Jason Bell. We were shooting couture. In July, when all the couture shows happen, it's one dress. So if you've not shot that dress by end of July, it's in tatters by August. So we were actually shooting Rebecca in August. We had no dresses because they're all in pieces. So we contacted Christie's, and this was a very happy accident from vintage couture and a Polish palace that was created in South London. That's Anna Friel by KZ Feng. So this is nipples in the gutter. So because, again, it is Europe, in Vanity Fair, you need big hair, big eyes, and boobs apparently sell. But my publisher last minute really felt nervous about showing a topless shot in a Condé Nast publication. So there was not much I could do afterwards. I can't really comp on a bikini. So we decided it would fit in the fold of the magazine, and everybody kind of was less offended. This is Amanda Seyfried by Simon Emmett and Gemma Arterton by David Schleiper. Not all of the shoots that you do have to be of high concept. Sometimes they just have to be styled beautifully, photographed beautifully, and they can be in a location. They don't always have to have this huge conceptual idea. So Gemma's in a studio. And this is just a kind of derelict house in South London that's used as a location. The dog was on set. She loves dogs. It kept her on set for another hour. So we said, okay, we'll shoot with the dog. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of wrangling to keep people happy. This was a fun shoot. As I said, in Paris, when you shoot couture, you get a very limited time with the dresses. So the dresses actually come round on a courier, and they whiz around Paris the week after the shows. And this German photographer, Christian Schuler, I just remember from this shoot, who just constantly keeps shouting, smoke, and more smoke. And every time he run around, it's like, just get more smoke. But yeah, we had an hour with each dress. We didn't like either of the girls' hair. So we sent out somebody to run and get wigs. And I think, the idea was going to be wind and smoke, but it always has to adapt slightly. It was never going to be this dark on my initial mood board. And that's another thing when you're a creative, you're always selling an idea. You're always pitching an idea, no matter whether you're working on editorial, whether you're working for a client. There's always somebody ahead of you. A creative director's very rarely at the top. So you've always got to make sure the person who's higher up than you is happy. Hi.
I'm not sure if this is on or not, but I'm just curious about lighting. Mm-hmm. Do you guys use the same kit, or is every shoot a different choice?
Every photographer is different, and you always send them lighting references. Often photographers will want, traditionally you light from the right and darks on the left. It's just kind of how it's been for centuries, but every photographer changes and the amount of lighting changes. And although you can give them references to, like, I want a hard light, I want a daylight, I want a front light, like a beauty dish. Often when you shoot women, you shoot flatter light, and when you shoot men, you shoot a harsher light, just because men can carry it. And yeah, but each photographer and each reference is different. Depends on what kind of feel you want to take. Oh, hi.
All the work that we've been seeing, is this after digital, or are there stuff in here that was done
still
with film?
I'm coming up to actually a film shot. Most of it has been, I'd say, about throughout the last, obviously more so now, it's been way more digital. Some people still shoot with film now, and I've shot with people with film. And there are fors and against. You certainly get subtleties in film, and it's certainly softer. You can get a much bigger gradient of color and contrast with film still than digital, but digital's so incredible now. A lot of people are using Hasselblads and using digital backs, which is kind of, the very highest quality I think you can get. I like shooting with that. But there are fors and against.
One more question about the dresses.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick the dresses, or did the fashion?
So you work with the fashion editor. So usually you get a rack, and this one's particular is a little different because there are limited dresses from couture. When you're talking about ready to wear, there's lots to select. So on a shoot, it depends. Some fashion editors will come with absolute racks and a room full of clothes, and you will go through with the photographer, with the talent. Often you edit it before the talent gets there, and then you have a fitting, and you want it to kind of hang as a story. So you've already briefed them on what the story will be and what kind of feel you'll have, and then you edit it down, and then you have a try on, you have a fitting, and then you see what's working. And often you'll do a test and see how it photographs. Some things look great on and look horrible being photographed. So it's a bit of a mixture. It's a bit of a, and again, these are teams that you work with. The room is filled with people, especially on the bigger budget shoots. You've got a number of assistants on both the photography side, on the, if there's a client, on the client side, on the stylist side, on the beauty team and the hair team. So there's a lot of people, and everybody wants to bring something to the table. Hairdresser wants the hair to be the most important thing on the shoot. Makeup artist wants the makeup to be, and the stylist wants to make sure the clothes are perfect. So there's a lot of interruptions as well, which is difficult sometimes. Yeah, we kind of wanted it to look underwater, which I think we kind of achieved on. The pink dress was probably my favorite shoot. So sometimes when it's, like I said, there's a concept, and sometimes the reader will never know what the concept was or where it came from. In this instance, we used Wayne Mesa. There was a New York Times article, I think, and it was about women actually having a physical reaction to jewelry, similar to chocolate, which is probably why women want nice sparkly things a lot of the time. But they came up with all of this scientific research about this physical reaction. So we decided to shoot in a clinic, and that was it. And we kind of wanted it to have that very medical vibe to it. So this was the one I was talking about, which we shot on film with Vincent Peters and Claire Danes. This was a full set build, often an editorial with restricted budgets. You have to do everything in a day. So the set build started at 6 and it wasn't finished when we wanted to start shooting. And that's when it starts to get a little bit of pressure, being the person who's trying to lead the shoot. So as the person who kind of knows what the timings are, how many shots you're going to do in a day, you slow things down or you speed things up. So the set wasn't ready. So you have a quiet word with the hairdresser and say, take your time. And then, you know, perhaps the photographer isn't ready. So you have a word with the makeup artist and say, you know, take your time. Or perhaps with the stylist, make sure she's tried on all of the dresses. And this is so the talent never gets bored, or they never are aware that anything's going wrong. I think we always try and protect them, especially with actors and actresses or musicians. Models are professionals and often are brilliant to work with and know how to hold themselves. When it comes to working with actors and actresses, they're not used to necessarily being in front of the camera or a two-dimensional camera, two-dimensional images. So you have to direct them quite clearly, and that might even be asking them to angle their arm in a different way because of foreshortening, asking them to sit in a particular way. And that you have to gain an instant trust with them to be really, you know, convince them that you want the best shot, because people think they know how they look best, but you know, when you're seeing their picture come up, that they might not look the best that particular way. And especially a lot of younger actresses are used to perhaps red carpet posing, which is absolutely not what you want for editorial. There have been occasions where I've been asked a variety of different requests. This was for part of my position in Vanity Fair was to work with clients directly and create editorialized images for them to use either within the magazine, or often it can be on their website. I've done stuff for billboards. And they want to speak directly to the audience of the magazine. They want access to that very limited crowd. So on this occasion, we were shooting all of these people, and because of rights, which you have to learn as a creative director, and costs, if you're using it for editorial, it's one price. If you're using it for advertising, it's another. So on this occasion, we didn't want to let the client down, and that's always key, to really push for things that they want. So in the end, I ended up taking these images so they could use online, because I was free of all charges and I'm cheap. So that worked. But these are the actual shots that we produced, and that was a kind of little teaser for them. So there are occasions where we have to compromise. And sometimes people won't compromise, so it's about coming up with solutions. So the image on the bottom left, it was about a TV show. They're all about TV shows. all of the TV shows had a theme. So the top left was about a kidnapping. But those imagery don't necessarily fit within the style of Vanity Fair. The top right was a modern day detective story, but I wanted it to have the look and feel of a kind of old sort of Chicago type gangster detective movie. And you come up with these ideas and you think they're great, and then the client actually buys them, and then you're like, oh God, I've got to actually make it rain. So we got a rain machine. And the bottom left one, the idea was these guys were going up into space, these old pensioners. So we had to I wanted to give like emblems of the story, but without giving it away. And the client, Sky Arts, were insistent that they included their logo within some of these pages. And as editorial, you're absolutely not allowed to. We don't include any kind of logos. And neither side was budging. So I created a newspaper in the bottom left, and that had their logo on it, and everybody was kind of pleased. The bottom right, we had a rat and a rat wrangler. So I'm afraid of everything that's smaller than a dog. So that was my brilliant idea that I was regretting on set, but everybody seemed to be okay with it apart from me. I think I viewed the screen from outside. Yeah.
As creative director, when you, let's just say for like an example, like the one with the two detectives outside, do you like ordering that, or I don't want to say ordering, but like getting that vintage vehicle, do you have to deal with the vendors of like the car vendor, like, you know, I don't know how to explain.
Yeah.
Like you have to deal with if you need to rent, you know, that kind of car, or certain things like a vintage tub or something like that. You deal with the vendors. Often
we try and find them. And then we either, the art director will either they'll give, it depends on the size of the team. Often the producer will do it, and the producer of a shoot is sometimes the photo editor, or there is a production department. And again, it all depends on the budget. Sometimes the photographer will come with their own production department because they insist on working with the people that they want to. In this case, I knew a guy, and there's a lot of that too. I spend a lot of time going, I'm sure I can get to a guy who's got it. And I had a vintage car, and my mechanic who worked on my vintage car knew a guy who had this car. So I was like, that's great. And often it is like that with the commissioning of the artist for one of the covers. It was like, how can I get to the artist? I knew a girl who knew a guy who knew the artist. So it's about like finding your roots. Again, like sometimes I regret some of my ideas because then you have to make it happen. The Huskies pulling a sledge on the roof seemed like a brilliant idea at the time, until we had to get 12 Huskies sent like 200 miles, and then they got delayed, and then the Huskies started crying, and then we were on top of a hotel, and the guests thought we were strangling a small child, and yeah, sometimes it's like, oh God, why didn't I just come up with something simple? I'm sure they would have bought it. Michael Bublé, sometimes you got to travel, which is great, but not to Canada for 12 hours from England. That was kind of a lot. But sometimes as well, like I say, not everybody's filled with as much confidence as you think they might be. So I wanted a lot of movement from Bublé, and this was a collaboration with Rolex. And often you've got to, you know, editorial or any kind of imagery is artistry thinly veiling some sort of advertising intent. So they wanted their watch shot. I wanted it to be subtle, so I gave them that. And then it's about kind of making the talent feel relaxed. So often it's about having a playlist. Often it's about running around, being a jester, telling them jokes, having 8 coffees and bouncing off the walls to make sure everybody's having a good time. And this instance, we cleared the set, and I kind of said to him, I was like, perhaps you could do a bit more movement. And he just sort of said, you basically just saying, dance, boy, dance. I was like, yeah. So we cleared the set, and he did. So Often it's about kind of having a moment. This was with David Bailey, who I love, who's one of my favorite photographers who I've admired for years. And I was thrilled at the opportunity to work with him. And I don't think he'd mind if he heard me speak today to say he's one of the rudest people that you'll ever meet. But I love him. No bullshit from him. And he kind of understood that that was going to be the way we move forward. We were waiting for Desmond Tutu for 3 hours because he was giving a speech. And when he came back, he was like, "You don't want a photograph of me?" He's a very sweet man. We got one picture of him. This was it, just one. And it appeared in the National Portrait Gallery in one of Bailey's exhibitions. And it was one of a real moment of a highlight for me to see something that a photographer had commissioned with a shoot that I helped organize, and then see it in a big gallery was really quite a moment. So working with clients, you sometimes don't get to do everything that you want to do. Moet and Chandon, they were insistent that we did an 8-page story with people, celebrities drinking champagne. And I didn't think that would speak to anybody besides people who just want to watch people drink champagne, which I'm not really sure that person exists. They wanted branding in it. And so I said, "You want branding? I'll give you branding." And we decided to make a set that it kind of faked perspective, and I wanted to play with scale. This was the second collaboration we'd done with Moet and Chandon. What you don't see is me behind that pile of corks, throwing them in the air. We spent about 5 hours poking corks through chicken wire, having 5 of us on the team search every site, eBay, contacting wine vendors. And then in the end, I was very pleased with the result. And Moet said, "But not all of them are Moet corks." I was like, I do see what you mean, but I think it still reads as champagne in the context of the story. I also decided to make a glass chandelier, and it was another thing that I was like, I don't know how we're going to make that, but working with great people and set builders, it's about having the right collaborators who want to make happen your extreme weird ideas. So whilst I was working at Vanity Fair, I also had a side gig as an art director for a Bulgarian magazine. This was a Playboy-inspired shoot from the 70s. I used to travel to Bulgaria once a month, and they were trying to get the franchise to work at, to gain GQ as their title. They want, in fact, Condé Nast has franchises as well as owning the magazines. They franchise out the titles. So they were very insistent when I first began with them that I must use photographers from Bulgaria, who aren't really the foremost photographers for fashion in the world. So I eventually convinced them that perhaps we could go in a different direction, and the name doesn't matter so much. It's really fine. We're going to get a great result, and nobody's going to really mind that the name differs. So I shot with this photographer, Raf, who was a new photographer at the time, and using small budgets, you really have to direct a photographer who's really new to it to really help them arrive at a result that will work editorially. This was based on Dorian Gray, very loosely. Anyway, so when the shoot was done, everybody was very pleased, and the magazine asked me what his last name was, and when I asked him, it was Stalin. So that kind of backfired a little bit, but fortunately they saw this funny side of it. These are a number of other shoots, some in Ibiza, some in studios, all for very small budgets using up-and-coming photographers. And it's exciting to use up-and-coming photographers. It's exciting to use very well-established photographers where you kind of know what you're going to get. And it's exciting to use new photographers because they're on, they're excited to do it. They're keen to do the very best job that they can. And I think you can work with them really to come up with something different. So a couple of years ago, I met with Teen Vogue, and I was asked to come over and be their art director. And mostly my job was to redesign the magazine. It had been previously focused towards a much younger audience, and actually the demographics, the median age was around about 23, which kind of shocked us all. So we redesigned it to be a little bit more sophisticated. It's kind of trying to capture the Vogue reader early and keep them for the Vogue brand. Also, what really changed, I suppose, for me when I came over to Teen Vogue was how things were changing in the print, in print in general, especially in magazines. And so I worked across digital and social media, and those three kind of triangulate now in every editorial decision, and especially in the last couple of years. So the shoot on the left was a collaboration with Instagram. We had a party in LA. We wanted to do a kind of photo booth with celebrities, but not have it so static or so kind of not energetic, and something a little bit different. So we photographed them, retouched them, illustrated on top of them, and they were uploaded within 12 or 15 minutes each shot. And it's those kind of projects that I actually really love. It's like really thinking quickly, really making decisions quickly, really deciding that's the picture, what a light retouch means, and how best to illustrate it. I'm working with two very different contributors. And we also had an advertiser on set who wanted to get their branding across. It was like a 4-pronged approach, which was kind of tricky, but it kind of worked. We ended up doing 20 uploads for the evening. Which brings me to where I am currently, which is with Content Development Group at Condé Nast, and this is definitely more of a design director role. As I said at the beginning, I've done both art direction on shoots and design direction. So sadly, this year has been a horrible year for music fans. So when Prince died, and also Bowie, we had less than a week to come up with a magazine that would be on newsstands within 2 weeks. Now, I know that newspapers do it quickly, but they have big teams. I managed to do all of the design for David Bowie in 5 days, which was quite hectic. Which brings me to my last project at Vogue. I worked with Vogue's editorial department to come up with a special edition, which was about It Girls. So it's targeted to a younger audience. And it had been my absolute dream and largest ambition that one day I would work for US Vogue. And I feel that this was a great kind of note to leave them on. I started at British Vogue 12 years ago as an intern, and my last project was for US Vogue. I'm working directly with Anna Wintour, who's an incredibly inspirational person, works very hard to ensure every detail is not overlooked. She never lets a thing that she doesn't like go past, and she lets you know, and it's hard work, it's tough. She often leaves you notes on Post-its. I have a really nice stack at home. But this is my particular favorite. It will be great. And I think that's what I'm really happy to take away from Condé Nast. It was great. So I told you at the beginning, it's my last day. And at the beginning of December, on the 5th, actually, 12 years to the day that I started at British Vogue, I'm going to work as the art director of fashion at Amazon. And I think it's important to know that as a creative director, you can move about. It's a platform to see images. We're telling stories. Those stories sometimes have a different audience. Those stories sometimes have a different intent or content. But essentially, we're still just making images, and those rules still apply, whether you're a drawer, a maker, a sculptor, a photographer, or a designer. The landscape of print has changed, and so have creative directors and art directors. And now not only do you have to come up with print solutions, you have to consider social media. And that doesn't just mean behind the scenes footage. Behind the scenes footage had its moment in about 2005. and now B-roll is kind of redundant. People want more content. So as a creative director now, you're working on small skits and sketches and ideas, and how that will translate into social media, and that permanence is certainly different. And trying to include all of those things on a day's shoot, trying to think of those audiences differently, works across every business now and every platform that a creative has to work on. Being on a shoot involves a spectrum of emotions and a spectrum of energies. You're thrown together with this group of people, and you're forced to be best friends within 5 minutes, as somebody once said to me. And it's not as false as you think. You're kind of working with people, you get along, you all want a good result. And you're forced to make these immediate friendships so the day will go smoothly. And at the end, you kind of feel euphoric, and then you leave and you're like, you know, a year goes by and you're like, oh, do I know you? Didn't we have a great time a year ago? It's exciting and nerve-wracking and exhausting all at the same time. And I started off by giving you a David Bailey quote, but George Melly said of David Bailey, today is going to be more exciting than any other day in the history of the world. And that's kind of how I feel when we're on set. But thank you for listening. And if you've got any questions, I'd love to hear them from you.
How do you generally find new talent to work with, such as photographers and other directors?
It's a variety of different ways, depending on who you want to work for. You get approached a lot. Your name's out there, you get approached a lot. And it's trying to see different people and see as much content as there is. I personally use Pinterest a lot for research. I kind of think it narrows down a search very well. But I also look to smaller magazines. I look to who people are following on Instagram, who I follow on Instagram, who they follow, and then who they follow. I go down a lot of wormholes. And it's exciting to see who younger magazines use or more independent magazines. They haven't necessarily got the budgets that some Condé Nast publications do. So it's interesting to see how they pick. And that also reflects on the changing fashions in photography. Currently, it's very lo-fi and real that I'm sure everybody thinks is really new. But if you look to the 90s, it echoes what Corinne Day was doing back then. And these things go in circles. You know, it's one of my favorite photographers currently is Emma Tempest, who I think is managing to straddle the two. She's showing that rawness, but executing it really still very brilliantly and perfectly in its imperfections. So a variety of different places, really. There's no hard and fast rules, but I do like researching a lot. I'm never off my phone.
Just piggybacking off of her question, I say I heard you say that you do a lot of searching through Pinterest, Instagram, et cetera. What would you say you see as a common thing that you see of photographers' work that you would say can be improved? Meaning, like you say, you see a consistent look of so-and-so to where it can go in a different direction.
I think it's difficult really to say like a blanket where that can be improved. I think people underestimate how difficult lighting is when they're trying to shoot in studios. It is very difficult to make it work. I think people over-retouch. I think people over-produce afterwards. Retouching is so important to do it delicately, especially on hair and skin. If you don't see the pores on the skin and it becomes flat, I'm out. If you see a poorly retouched image, then you kind of know that that you haven't got the taste level or the expertise to know that that's poorly retouched. And I think that's a big indicator for me. You know, models are important, but not everything, especially at the moment where perhaps there's a trend for awkwardness, and there's definitely a trend for beauty being described in many different ways. We're not going through a moment where it's like the supermodel, the glamazon, the waif. It's a variety, and that's exciting. That's really exciting, that diversity. But yeah, I would say a poorly retouched image is a big sign, a big no-go.
Since you have all the context and since you are the one that pulls everything together, have you ever thought of building something of your own, like a site and with the people you know, with all the photographers?
I think that's every creative director's frustrated dream. And I certainly know a number of creative directors who have. And you always kind of have an idea of how to do it on your own. I think it's trying to establish what the new is, and which everybody's in search for. And I think for me personally, I would have always loved to have my own magazine with its own identity and its own stamp. And it's not something that I will ever let go of. So, yes, I think.
So this is from the audience watching online, and the question is, what are your favorite sources for art and design inspiration?
I think I do a lot of typographical research. I think right now, I've always been a fan of Neil Brody. I always kind of think that element's going to come through for me. I'm a huge design fan, whether it be graphic design or I'm a massive obsessive furniture watcher, collector, and one-day maker. And I think design and inspiration can come in all forms. I don't think it has to be a direct one-to-one translation. I think just looking at how to make things more elegant wherever you see it is what I kind of draw inspiration from. But yeah, certainly typographically, it would be something more of a 60s modernity feel to it, which is in line with like Twen magazine or ID or The Face when it originally came out. And there's more of a trend for that now as well, which is good because it fits with my aesthetic.
Another online question. What would you say are some of the prerequisites for being an art director or a creative director?
I think you've got to be ballsy. You've got to really kind of own your opinion, but you've also got to move with it. I think everybody has an opinion. If someone has a different opinion to yours, it doesn't mean yours was ever wrong. And you've got to accept that. You've got to accept a lot of criticism and a lot of people changing your idea. And I think it's important to not lose sight that when you're receiving that yours wasn't bad. I think you've got to remain strong, and that's difficult sometimes. And also not to be so inflexible that you think you're always right. Obviously you do because you think it, so why would you think it was wrong? But it's about constant learning and constant researching and discovering somebody new. And every time you meet somebody new, they have a different ideal, they have a different aesthetic, and it's about understanding where they arrived at. So continually thinking that it's a new challenge as opposed to something that you can do with your eyes closed.
Got another question here. This is more from a photography perspective, but when you're scouting locations, how do you find them? Do you have somebody that you tap into or work with somebody on the team? How's that process?
Again, locations are really difficult. Sometimes you've got a corner of a wall in mind and you're like, that's going to just photograph beautifully. And then you want to pick that location and you're like, crap, what am I going to do for the other 4 shots? Because I've just made everybody schlep out here to the middle of nowhere for this corner of a wall that I quite like. But I have done, and it doesn't always go down well. But there are location sites. And again, it's like, it's constantly having your eyes open. It's never kind of being at work and then not being at work. As I said, it should be a passion, I think. It's something that you love doing, so you never really switch off. So you try and make notes, you try and collect ideas. And then in a case where A lot of the time you need permits, especially over here. Location managers are very good. They're very good to scout with, and producers. And sometimes the photographers will have an idea. They've shot a lot of different places. The stylist will throw in some ideas. Like, everybody will throw an idea into the pot. It's about kind of seeing what works with your concept. And so a variety. There's no hard and fast rules. That doesn't really help anybody, does it?
Please explain, it's probably good for some of the photographers here. Please explain your process for selecting the photographer once the creative team has figured out the concept.
It's trying to find somebody who's in line with what you want to do. I try and meet every photographer prior to working with them, because a lot of the time it's chemistry on set. It's like, I can't stress enough how it can be a great day if everybody's a great kind of person. And if somebody's carrying with an ego with them who doesn't want to budge or doesn't want to change their point of view, that's really difficult. So personality is a big thing. Often you definitely get your favorites. You definitely always have your favorites who are your go-tos, where you think, I loved working with that team, and you put those teams together again. But I like to use new photographers, and like I say, meet them and let them talk about their work. And you've got to be able to articulate why you made choices. I think when you see a book that's too diverse, it makes me nervous. It can be good and it can be bad. You kind of want to see what that photographer's style is a little bit, and then you want to see movement around it. If you see something that's like one page to the next, it could be 12 different photographers, then I kind of steer clear from them, because I'm not sure which person they're gonna be on the day.
And to follow that up, what about the other aspects of the creative shoot? So choosing the stylist, hair, makeup, set design. Do you leave that up to the photographer, or do you also choose all those things?
Again, it's different. Some photographers will work with certain people. Budget's a big part of it. You know, if you could always shoot with Guido, or if you could always shoot with Sam McKnight, perhaps you would always want to. And some people do. It depends on what the hair's like, what the hair you want to have. A variety of different thoughts. Some stylists are more androgynous. Some stylists are better with couture. Some stylists want to turn up and create something that's completely unique using kitchen foil and bathroom toilet rolls. I don't know. It all depends. It all depends on the shoot. I've never worked with toilet rolls, just came to me. It was a good idea.
So in your new role, how do you anticipate dynamics changing, or like your work changing? Like, will there be backgrounds in these photos, or like how they will be published? And just like your thoughts on that transition.
And to follow it up more in detail about what you're actually doing in your role.
Oh, okay. So I don't know completely. So as the art director of fashion for Amazon, I think there's limited things I can say, because it's changing a lot over the next year, and I don't want to lose my job before I start it. But I kind of think that when you land on the page, perhaps they'll be like, they're going to be highlighting outerwear, or perhaps they want to do a shoe kind of story. So the landing page where you land, there'll be more of an editorialized image, which will reflect that using their brands. And then you'll go in, and then it'll become shoppable. So it won't be, there'll be some studio naturally, and then there'll be some location, and it will depend. But yeah, I'm excited. It's different to work on something that's so much more commercial, which is more of a click to this if you want this, and here are the products. But as I say, everything's kind of transitionable. One thing is will work on another space. It's just working to your audience, I think, So it'll be a lot of finding that out. I think my third day I start on a shoot. So I'll need to know what that's about before I start.
So maybe this might be general knowledge, but I'm not aware of it. I was just wondering if these actors, that the people that you guys choose to photograph and photographers get paid at all by the magazine, or always or never.
If the actors get paid?
For magazine shoots in general.
Generally, models will get paid because that's their profession. In my experience, actors and actresses are using it as a platform to promote something, so they don't. But models are...
Photographers?
Oh, photographers, yes.
Every time?
Everybody gets paid. Some people less than others. Some people demand more money. But yeah, budgets are different, but yeah.
And you guys give them like the budget, you choose to do it or not, or do they give you an amount?
Yeah, there's always a budget that you will have. And sometimes if you're working in, perhaps you're working across the magazine, you have a budget for the whole thing. So perhaps if a photographer asks more money for one shoot, you can do that and you'll get somebody to do a shoot for less money. So you sometimes work on the whole budget. But, it depends on experience. People have different rates, like everybody has different rates.
I just have a quick question about your time over at Teen Vogue.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any decision making as far as making it the size that it's in? The small
I didn't.
size?
It came in that small size when I started. I'm not sure what I think. I'm not sure where the thought process was on that. I wasn't involved in it. It started 10 years ago. It came from people who worked with Vogue. Perhaps it was a more digestible version for a younger audience. I know UK Glamour's in the same size. They called it handbag sized. But no, I'm not really certain where they arrived on that particular size.
Question: did you do any work with motion or video?
Mm-hmm.
And talk about that. Was it very different from doing photography, or was there similar things?
Yeah, it is different. Like I say, previously, I was going to say previously on Homeland. Previously, it was more B-roll. It was more kind of giving a glimmer of a very curated behind the scenes where it looks like you're having fun, and then you see elements of the people working on the shoot. And now I think it's just become tired. It's become a tired formula. So yeah, it's about kind of coming up with strange ideas. I worked on a shoot, a video exclusive only, and it was about dancing through the decades. I'm not really sure why, but it kind of seemed like a good idea. So we had an actor dance the Charleston, then he would dance all the way to like Manchester raves, and then he would dance to, I think he was twerking by the end. It's supposed to be quite funny.
You said before about how you seek out photographers a lot, and they're always throwing stuff at you, I'm sure. So what are you, in terms of their approach, what are you sort of receptive to and not receptive to?
Isn't that the key?
I mean, just in terms of like, okay, you're bugging me, or like the way they
it's a fine line. It's difficult. I think keeping people updated on something new is important. I think what's difficult is if you're pushing, if you always expect a response. Right. Where it's like, I've just seen this, what do you think? It's like, I don't know. I didn't hear from you. Did you miss my last email? I've had those. No, I chose to ignore it. I think you might have missed this one too. Is it going to your spam? It's like, leave me alone. So it's a fine balance of, I wouldn't do it weekly. Perhaps if you've done something that you think is particularly aligned with that brand, it's important. Right. I think when you get the mass kind of, dear everyone, that doesn't really work. That doesn't really work for anybody I know.
What was I? Oh, and what about So email in general, is that sort of like, I mean, you must get hit so much, I imagine. What about like printed pieces and things like that?
Yeah, you get all sorts. You get all sorts through the mail. You get all sorts on your inbox. You get tagged in random pictures on Instagram. I don't know. I think the ones that have really stuck out to me of somebody who's done something very different. The flyers and the cards don't really grab me, but that's not to say it doesn't grab somebody else. One guy did a very large format printed newspaper, which I loved, and I kept, and I ended up commissioning him. One guy was just really funny and just kind of emailed me and was really overly confident, and that kind of spoke to me. So it's difficult. I would certainly say don't do a kind of mass shout out, and also don't be. I've had a lot of, I think you'd really like to print this, and it's like, no, I don't want to. And also you kind of, it shows you're inexperienced because we don't just print random stuff people send us online. Yeah. Right. So yeah, perhaps if it's like, I did this and thought of you, let me know if you want me to get in touch. I'm outside. I can see what you're wearing.
Binoculars.
Probably only have time for maybe 3 or 4 more questions. But going off of what Mike said, would it be more preferable to try to get some type of recommendation or referral? Do you think that works a little bit stronger for you?
Yeah, certainly. I've certainly had recommendations from people who I've worked with, and knowing them and knowing them well, then you trust them. And if you trust their eye, if you get a recommendation from, you know, your mum's friend down at the grocery store, you kind of take it less seriously. But from another creative, absolutely. And you do take a lot of recommendations. And sometimes it's down to, like, you know, I've worked with this person before, they're great, I think they could do something great for you, for what you're working on. Or would you and if somebody asks me, would you take a look at that person? I always do, because you want to put people forward, and I put people forward all the time as well. So you want to share, like it should be a sharing creative pool. So yeah.
Going back to the prerequisite question, but so there are kind of a number of different avenues that one could take to become a creative director. Obviously, if you look at Jodi Peckham of Rolling Stone, she was a photo director, photo editor, I should say. You kind of started out in photo editing.
I just did whatever they told me to do. Yeah, I was good at that.
So what do you think might be one path? Should somebody try to be a photographer first, or do graphic design or photo editing, or?
I think just kind of having a passion and being informed and trying to get your foot in the door. It's difficult here in editorial now because they've actually stopped doing internships. But getting your foot in the door in any kind of creative field, whether that be with a photographer. I've known people who've been photographers' assistants, and that gives you a great insight. I've known people who have just come on a more of a purely design side, and again, I've known people who've come from the photo editing side. So it's like I'd love to give you a crib sheet of, here you go, this is what you do, take it away and start with this email address. But it's also flexible and inflexible. It's difficult to kind of say. I would just try and be exposed to as much experience, and that does involve unpaid experience a lot of the time. Working in your spare time, working in your free time, working on your weekends, being a gopher, being a carrier. We've all done it. We've all been that person who's stood making tea. And I think that's an important part of it, kind of working your way through that, and being exposed to. I know people who have started catering for shoots just to get in. It's like people who've DJ'd on shoots just to get in. So it's just being very tenacious, not letting no distract you from where you want to be, and being overly helpful. Can't do you much wrong, I think.
It's kind of more of an easier question. What from the audience online. What's been your most wildest, most memorable experience as an art or creative director?
There's been some crazy ones.
Give us a story.
I think my most favorite experience, which wasn't really creative directing a shoot, but again, it came from a client meeting with Vanity Fair, and they didn't have the budget to send a photographer to do a travel piece in the Cook Islands. So I was like, I mean, I'll do it. Like, I'll do it. I can do it. And they said, okay, which kind of daunts you a little bit as well, to just go out to the other side of the world with a camera.
So
yeah.
you photographed this piece.
And it is about calling your bluff. And it's like, oh, God. And there's a lot of times, and I think those are the most rewarding times when it's like, yeah, we can totally do that. And then they say, okay, then. And you're like, oh, God. But that was brilliant. I mean, I traveled on my own, and I went up a mountain with a... What did I do? Went into a cave and swam with cockroaches. I mean, it was a big personal challenge, but no, I used a Leica, and it was a fully manual rangefinder, and it was a bit terrifying. So I took 5,500 images, and that was a big edit.
So probably one more question for me, and then does anybody else have any? No, it's fine. You people, she's right here. Amazon fashion. And you guys have questions? You guys have questions? No. So
I don't get a discount on Prime. I can't get it.
So I remember our earlier conversation. You were kind of talking about the amount of research that you've done and your interests. Talk about the varying things that you find interested in, that you research and you study. I know that you read a lot of books, and you actually are very knowledgeable on the shows and the styling that's coming out, and just graphic design and typography. Talk about kind of how you merge all those different things and into your creative eye, and really locking in on what your vision is and how your taste level is very high.
Pinterest boards, and folders and tear sheets and screenshots, and I never throw anything away because I'm a bit of a hoarder. And everybody who I admire I admire art directors, a number of art directors, and I'm a fangirl to those, and I kind of want to see what they're doing, and where their styles and influences are going. And then different publications from, and it not necessarily American or British, European, you definitely see shifts, and then you definitely see kind of pulls. And it's about kind of who you respect and what they're doing, and then how to kind of move it on a little as much as you can. And that comes from every point of view. And looking back to look forward. As I say, these things kind of have these circular trends. They're like in fashion, you know. At some point, ski pants will come back in about 10 years. I don't know. But, you know, chokers came back, and nobody expected that to happen. So certain shifts will come back. And it's about having as much knowledge as you can. Seeing design shows, seeing typography exhibitions, seeing photography exhibitions, seeing where music's going in a different direction. You know, it's not, I don't like to just focus on magazines or photography. You know, you see all those influences in design, from design to architecture to music, from album covers to comics. So a variety of different places, and it's just about consuming. And we're fortunate enough now for that to be very easy to do. When I first started, you know, most of my research was done at the libraries. Most of my research was done at the Condé libraries and looking back at old images. Now you can be researching constantly. And again, like, I'll search hashtags and see what people have liked. I'm a bit of a stalker, I think it's coming across. But yeah, I think just never stop looking. Everything around you is an influence and an inspiration. So
being that you're transitioning to Amazon, talk about where you kind of see magazine publishing and print photography kind of going. And I guess also talk about the big change that recently happened with Condé Nast and the whole mushing creative departments together? And where do you kind of see that happening?
So yeah, it's just been announced recently that the creative departments will come together on one floor at Condé Nast. I think it's a smart move. I think it's good to learn from your peers as opposed to keeping it separate. I mean, I don't know if I'm probably not the only one, but I don't think there is a death of print. I think it just has to change. I think it has to become more collectible. I think for fashion news or for news, we don't look at print anymore to get that information. As soon as the runway's kind of completed, we're over Fashion Week by the time Fashion Week's done. So we don't need to see that regurgitated exactly 3 months down the line. I think it's much more about curating and understanding that we'll always want to, I think, consume from people who have a voice and have a taste level that we admire. As much as you can see what's happening on the runway, I think it's important to learn from somebody else. What is that good? Is it bad? Like you kind of always want to know what other people think. And the space for magazines, I think, is collectibles and making each issue very special and have a voice. I think looking to publications to speak to you. I mean, they've always had a voice, but I think now it's more important to retain that identity and retain that identity of a taste. We don't necessarily just need to see, you know, what's already happened, but I do want to know what they thought of it. And I think people will still want that. And I think this trend for the constant consumption of images, this overload, I'm not saying I think it will pass, but I think it becomes exhausting. And I think you do want to refine that down. And I think that's why there is a longevity there. But yeah, of course, commercially, the publishing houses are certainly looking towards digital as an important platform to speak about things in a more immediate way and be very much more flexible to be responsive immediately, which is also imperative in these times.
And then kind of a final question, and this could be maybe why Amazon brought you on, but it's also this notion of now you're seeing more brands trying to be more editorial, trying to editorialize their process or products or story, even though that's not traditionally what they are. Do you kind of see that as something being more of a trend?
I think it's interesting because being thrown all of these pictures, I do think you want to see a curated image. I still think we want to see beautiful things. I don't think that's changed just because we've got a technology. I still think we want to see things that are beautiful, and we want to see things that are being created for us and speak to us. You know, there are certainly ways in which now we're thrown things because we like something else, but I don't think we're ever going to tire of that. It's just a different time and a different space to see them. And perhaps it'll take a while for us to really acknowledge that we are seeking that. But I hope, I'm still hopeful that that's essentially what people want to look at. I want to look at beautiful things. So I'm hoping there are other people who want to too.
Awesome. That was an amazing talk. Everybody watching online, the replay will be available in about an hour once it does all its magic crunching. Everybody here, we'd like to just say thank you to Karen for coming out and spending your last day on Condé Nast with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.